But we had the reading this morning. It was what we call the triumphal entry. And so in these services leading up to Easter is next Sunday, we're doing things different to remind us about how different Easter is. So we read in John about this story where Jesus is coming into a city and the people were holding something up. As I had my pre-K kids do, they waved their arms like this. What were the people in the crowd waving? Palm trees. It's interesting in today's day and age, and also in Bastrop County, it was easier for me to get fake palm trees than it was for me to get real ones. So thank you for the family that brought these for me. But the people waved palm branches. Why? Were they scared that Jesus was coming, or were they excited? They were excited that Jesus was coming. They thought that something good was going on. But I have a question. You know, this palm branch actually took somebody doing a special trip just for me. But which takes more time? Custom embroidery of a banner or cutting down a palm branch? The banner. I mean, these were people who were peasants, lowly. This wasn't an official welcome by the city. This was something that just took being outside and a knife. But they still wanted to praise Jesus. They also laid down their cloaks. They also laid down their jackets. But who are they shouting for? They're shouting for someone they think can get them something. We'll talk more about what they thought he could get them in a moment. But there's something else we need to think about in this story. Not just that the branches were something that were impromptu, something that was of peasants, not of royalty. But there's another piece to the story. No, I get dirty a lot. It's okay. Thanks, Alyssa. All right. This. What is this? Since Alyssa pointed out it's so dirty. What is this guy? A saddle blanket. Who here has a saddle blanket this dirty? Who here owns a saddle blanket this dirty? Saddle blankets get dirty because riding horses is not the cleanest job. Now, if you are getting all dudded up for the rodeo, you put your saddle blanket on the biggest, meanest, or prettiest horse, depending on what you're going for. And if you were trying to make your entrance into a city and be regal and be impressive, if you were a Roman general or if you were even Caesar, you put your saddle blanket on the biggest, baddest horse around. What animal does Jesus put his saddle blanket on? A donkey. Now, there is prophecy connected to it, but anybody that was connected to Rome, anybody that had watched a Roman triumphal entry would say, this is silly. Caesar wouldn't be caught dead on a donkey. And you bet, if all that the town did to greet Caesar was cut off, oh wow, this branch stabbed that, was cut off branches and shake them at him and chant some folk songs, he may wipe the village out. We need to see that the triumphal entry is triumphant, but it was slightly low effort. It wasn't sanctioned by the state, and it wasn't thought of weeks in advance. It was people saying, ooh, where's the noise? Can I be a part? And what was the noise that they were specifically thinking about? Well, there's some people in the story who aren't so happy that sort of help us understand why this is so impromptu. I'll make sure to read this part for you. These are the grumpy guys. These are the grumpy guys in the story. And it says here in verse 18, the reason why the crowd went to meet him was they had heard he had done a sign. This is verse 19 of chapter 12. So the Pharisees said to one another, you see you are gaining nothing. Look, the world has gone after him. What specifically was the sign? What was the sign that made Palm Sunday happen? It says in your text in verses 16 and 17, but it has to do with this. I'll walk down here. Can anybody see what this is? What do you guess this is? A grave rubbing from Bateman Cemetery. I saw many surnames and last names even from this room. I looked for the oldest one that I could find, and I found this one, and it has what looks to be like 1886 on it, but I couldn't make out the name. I just see Ellis, and then the last name I can't read. But this one I very much could read, and I've already been told that some of you actually know this person, Winscott. And it says the date is 1902 to 1955. 1955. And the reason I bring the grave rubbings is for us to think about what a cemetery is. We think about them as sacred places. If somebody tells the children, oh, just go play at the cemetery, we're going to say, you're crazy. Cemeteries are supposed to be sacred. They're supposed to have all of our expectations met. We don't want anything out of place. I saw the Bateman cemetery. These Pharisees are so upset. People are so ambivalent, even during the triumphal entry, saying, I'm not sure about this guy. Wave your sticks, put down your cloak, but we're not going to roll out the red carpet. Because everybody is there, because whenever Jesus walked into a cemetery where his friend Lazarus was, the dead didn't stay dead. The Pharisees didn't quite know why. They didn't quite know how, but they knew they didn't like it. The Jewish religious leaders put big emphasis on what death was, on what burial was, a proper burial was, and there was nothing proper about Jesus. He told Lazarus, come out of the tomb. And the people were excited about it, but did they believe it? What does it say? They said, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And it says, certainly the King of Israel? No, it says, even. This is a crowd that is here because they're excited about what happened yesterday, what they saw in the news, not because they believe this man. They're waiting and seeing. They invested enough time to cut off some branches. They invested some time to take off their cloaks. They do cheer for him, but even their religious leaders say, this guy is messing with our stuff. He's messing with our sacred places. And that's what Palm Sunday is. And as we continue this service, we'll talk about how this crowd, this mob, changes. Do we just read about a birthday party or a trial? A trial. It's not exciting. It's not happy in John 18. But you guys remember last week, I held up handcuffs. Is Jesus squeaky clean or does he have a record? He has a record. Some of us have employers or have been employers that would not hire Jesus. This is the story of his trial. Why is this passage hard? Why do I want you to see it today instead of just saying, it's Palm Sunday, everything's fine? Because at the end of this week, on Friday, what Easter takes us to and through is Jesus is executed. And here's why we read the trial. It's so that we would remember in John 18, in this story, all four accounts of the gospel, is his trial fair? No, it is a terrible injustice. So, first off, let's talk about the characters here in John 18. What do we see? We see the Jews in this story. Who are these people? Who are these leaders? We hear Pilate say, am I a Jew? Well, who are the Jews? They're ruled and oppressed by Rome. They didn't have the freedoms that we have. They didn't have the voice that we had. If Caesar said, this is the way it is, that's the way it was. And if there was a crazy king that felt he had the authority of Rome, he could just kill people. Maybe even all the boys from Jesus' from Jesus' village. And then there's something that these Jewish crowd does. The same people that would have been a part of the crew saying, Hosanna to the one who comes in the name of the Lord. They bring him to Pilate. They say, this guy's a bad guy. He's arrested. We've put him in chains. You need to do something about it. And listen to verse 29 of chapter 18. What accusation do you bring against this man? Very normal statement from a judge to the people. What accusation? And here's how they answered. Not XYZ, not he was doing something against Caesar. Their first response, if this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you. In the United States, if you watch a lawyer show, if you watch a cop show, they say you are innocent until proven guilty. Jesus' justice that he faced is so backwards, he is guilty until proven innocent. Can't you see that he's in chains, Pilate? Isn't that enough? He's obviously a bad guy. He looks like a bad guy. He's in chains. The religious leaders have said he is messed up. Isn't that enough, Pilate? So Pilate, instead of just throwing him out, if you came to a judge and said, this guy is guilty until proven innocent, he'd say, see you later. We would hope so. But Pilate entertains the mob and says, I'm going to hear what the crime is, what the challenge is. And he hears them talk, and he hears their accusations, and ultimately, it comes out that it's rumored that this Jesus, this peasant from Nazareth, is king of the Jews. And Pilate asks this very important question to see what kind of man Pilate is. Pilate asks, are you king of the Jews? I have a question. Does Jesus look like a king at all right now? No. Probably still in chains. Probably smells bad and hasn't slept all night because he's been getting interrogated and punched in the face. We have the authority, every Jewish authority, if he was to ask Pilate, is this guy your king? They would say, no way. This guy's a jerk. This guy's a loser. So he doesn't look like a king. The people that Pilate is asking is he the king of, totally are trying to abandon him. But Pilate is so confused by the situation that he has to ask, are you the king of the Jews? Do you have like the king of the Jews, certification? And Jesus' response is very telling. He says, do you say this? This is verse 34, chapter 18. Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? And Jesus will go on to say in verse 36, my kingdom is not of this world. The reason, Pilate, I don't look like a normal king is because I'm a different kind of king with a different kind of kingdom. And what's tragic in the justice of this is Pilate, is he a low-level authority or is he the Supreme Court? As far as Judea goes, he is the Supreme Court. Every day he wakes up and decides this person's right, this person's wrong. This person dies, this person lives. And here's the saddest thing that Pilate is going to say. After Jesus says that his kingdom is not of this world, after he says, Pilate, you say that I am a king, Pilate says the most terrible thing you can hear a judge say in verse 38. Pilate said to him, what is truth? If you don't have to raise your hand, but if you've been to court, even if it's just traffic court, you may hear the judge say, I don't understand all your evidence, or I don't think you have good witnesses. But if the judge from the bench says, what is truth? You're going to have a very bad day. If he says, man, telling right from wrong, telling truth from false is something I can't do, it's going to be a bad day. Jesus exposes that this highest court, this highest judge is a sham. What's the last thing I want you to notice from this passage? Pilate is having is Pilate having an easy time making this decision or hard? It's pretty hard. Pretty hard. I mean, it's pretty evident Jesus isn't an actual king. That's pretty evident. It's pretty evident that the Jews actually don't want to follow him in a rebellion. But Pilate is having a hard time of this. Now, if you're having a hard time making a decision, you can ask for counsel. You can ask for advice. You can ask for more time. Sometimes court can go into recess. But it gets even worse. Pilate blows it even more as a judge. This is verse 38, the second part. After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him. He doesn't say release him. He just says, me personally, Pilate, the guy who can't tell truth from falsehood, the guy that can't notice whether someone's truly a king or not, find no guilt in him. And here's the most tragic tragic part of the justice that Jesus receives. But you have a custom. Think about that for a moment. If you were on trial for something terrible or something small, traffic court or murder, we would be dumbfounded if we came up to the stand and we were awaiting the verdict, the decision from the judge, and he said, "We have a custom. It's almost St. Patrick's Day, and you're wearing green." You see how silly that sounds? Pilate is saying, you have a tradition in your culture that's not Rome, but that's how I'm going to make my decision. It's almost 4th of July, Jesus, and you're not wearing red, white, and blue. It's Christmas time, and you're not wearing red and green. There's mistletoe over the witness stand, and you didn't kiss somebody. You have a custom. Who here would be very happy with your judge if they decided your case like that? No. Unless the custom went in your favor. He said you get released if you're wearing green. You get released if you have a lucky rabbit's foot, or whatever the custom may be. Pilate takes all of his Roman authority, the largest empire in history at that point, the most powerful empire that could make judgments all over the world, and defers to a custom of the people. You have a tradition that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So I have a question. Did Jesus receive justice? No. He was wronged at every turn. His case wasn't decided even because it was confusing for Pilate. He just gave all the authority to a custom. I'm not going to decide. So what you need to hear, and we will have one more brief sermon at the end of this, what leads us to Easter, what's going to get us to Good Friday, this Friday, is a tragic injustice. Jesus is received by this Jewish people. Are they supposed to be devoted to righteousness or unrighteousness? Righteousness. They're supposed to devote themselves to knowing truth from falsehood. But they say, he's arrested, isn't he? Isn't that enough to condemn him? He's received by this judge, Pilate, that every day decides who lives and who dies. And he says, I don't even know what truth is, and I'll just let a custom decide it. Jesus gets a mockery of justice. Jesus knows injustice. Did the crowd change from palm branches to crucify him? Their attitude toward Jesus changed. But who they were, was that different? Did they bring in some people from the outside? They were the whole time, if you asked any single one of them, are you the people of God? And they would say, yes. Yes. They would say, we're the children of Abraham. We're God's chosen people. We believe that God frees slaves from captivity. We're excited that this guy might be able to raise people from the dead. But whenever push came to shove, and it was their neck on the line, or this Jewish peasant named Jesus, they shouted, crucify him. They didn't change. Now, the religious leaders had been thinking about this for months, but the people in the street, the mob, the common folk, the ones who had 9-to-5s, blue-collar jobs, they'd just been mulling this over for a week. They liked him at the beginning. They didn't like him at the end. They began, maybe I'll follow this guy. Maybe I'll see what I can get out of him. So what do I want us to hear? We don't want to hear about the mob. We don't want to hear about this crowd that on Palm Sunday transforms to a murderous mob by Good Friday, by the time of the trial, and say, oh, those poor guys, if they'd only known. A lot of times we read the story of Palm Sunday and Good Friday and say, those are people then. But they are us. The people of God weren't ignorant that Jesus had called himself the Son of God. They said, that's part of the problem. We think the only way through this is the Son of God dies. And that is part of our story of Easter. Many churches will go from sunshine to sunshine and never think about something happened on the cross. It says in Romans 3:23, for all have sinned. Not just the crowd that was in front of Pilate, but for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Not every day, maybe not today, but there have been times in your life, if Jesus had the audacity to ride into town on a donkey, you wouldn't wave branches and shout Hosanna. You would want to punch him in the face. See, the reason the people thought Jesus couldn't come through is because they didn't understand the timing. They didn't understand the story. They didn't understand how hopeless they were. Their situation, our situation too, is so bad that part of what saves us is the Son of God dies. And that is terrible, and it doesn't feel good. Now, I have to make sure we hear that. I have to make sure we hear that we are the children of God, that we are the people of God, the ones of promise that say part of that promise is the Son dies. And I don't want to get too far into next week. That sounds hopeless. But is that the end? Is that all of the truth? No. The people of God shouting, crucify him, isn't the last word. There will be another word. There will be the Son of God saying, Father, forgive them. And then we'll hear on Easter, he'll tell a lowly woman named Mary, go and tell my disciples. But as we get ready for Good Friday, the day that the sacrifice was made, the day that our sins were atoned for, we need to think of ourselves, how am I the crowd? You've also had times, not where you wanted to punch Jesus, but you were just following for what you could get. I think he'll help me out this way or that way. But if you ask yourself, is he truly Lord? Is he truly Son of God? Or is he just someone I'm following until things get hard? The answer would be no. No, as soon as the tide turns, as soon as something doesn't go my way, I'm out of here. So today, yes, hear the story of the crowd. Hear that Jesus faced terrible injustice. But as we are going into our time of invitation, we will have Brandy leading us in special music. I want to, before she comes up, there's this last slide with these reflection points I want us to see. And yes, today, if you say, whoa, I now understand what Jesus, the Son of God, did for me. And you want to come down here and pray with me and say, I want this to be real. I want this to be new. And we'll talk about following him. We'll talk about confessing your sin and making him Lord. But for all of us, this crowd, who some days, yeah, we're jumping and hooting and hollering, and some days we'd punch them in the face. Reflect on the mob. These were people who had heard about Jesus. Reflect on Jesus in justice, that his own judge, the highest court, said, what is truth? And reflect on the truth that the only reason we are God's people is because next Friday we'll celebrate the Son of God laying down his life for us.